She had like white hair that she would curl with those crazy black curlers that were really like pokey, and then there was like a pink stick that you jammed through it. And then she would sleep in them all night long with this like polyester do-rag on top of her head. And she wore melon-colored lipstick and a Estee Lauder perfume, and she was quite Buznik. I remember my grandmother was having like enormous cans, frankly. And then it turns out she also had a secret, like that her friends kept the family secret, which was my grandmother loved to gamble. And I was one of the only people who asked her. She had 7 kids, and she had a mess of grandchildren, and I was one of the only ones who ever like sat down and had conversations with my grandmother, which I realized as a very young kid, the way to do that was to sit on the floor while she was doing the laundry, because she would talk and talk. She told me how she met my grandfather. She told me how she worked in a chicken plucking factory during the war. She told me that story when I was sitting in her lap, though, and she was petting my hair, and she told me how when you work in a chicken plucking factory, you know, the way to get good tender meat was to calm the chicken. You just stroke the bird and then you break its neck. So I have a lot of respect for my grandmother. And her name is Josephine Dudek-Dębinski, 100% Polish. She can make a fierce glunky, and that's amazing. Thank you. You had a Polish grandmother too. And so I had a tremendous amount of respect and love for this woman. She was the Christmas tree of Christmas. In fact, every Christmas, the biggest present would always be for my grandmother, and she would find out what you liked. And so my aunt liked owls, and she knew I loved big silver jewelry. So, I mean, she would give me, they were like gongs. They were like the most ridiculous, like, it was like a silver version of Mr. T. And every year I would get this ridiculously ugly jewelry from my grandmother, and I'd be like, yes! And my sister was still getting Barbies until she was like 14. You forgot to tell Grandma you moved past that. And so she would always give you a box that like you'd open it and you'd be really super excited because it would say it was a rock tumbler, but instead it was socks. And it was like things you get at Odd Lots that are like 4 bath cubes of varying weird English scents that give you yeast infections. Yeah, you all know what I'm talking about. So when my grandmother passed away, it was very sudden, and it was a really, really an intense sense of loss because at that point I had already moved away, and I lived in Ohio. My family lives in Michigan. My family is really weird. It's a big, sprawly family, and were giving my aunt shit for moving 45 minutes away. So for them, I was like, I had totally betrayed the family by moving to Ohio, where it's flat and brown. So, you know, I mean, it was almost an afterthought. I was literally the last person, I think, that received a phone call to say that my grandmother had gone into the hospital, and the circumstances of that were pretty tragic and strange. She had been coughing every time she would eat or drink. She would go like this. And finally my aunt had said, you know, Ma, what is going on? I'm just going to take you, I want to take you to the doctor. And my grandmother said, no, I don't want to do that. And they thought my grandmother was senile, that was another thing. I think she was just hilarious. She was crazy, I think she was losing her mind. The last conversation I remember having with my grandmother, I stood in her kitchen and she was telling me, she had a really deep, gravelly voice, and she said to me, so I went to get a mammogram. And I go, oh, you did? And she goes, do you know what they do to you? And I was like, no, I never had a mammogram. She said, they take your boob and they shove it in a plate and they smash it. And she goes, they pull it all the way across the room. And she goes, and I shot out some Diet Coke. I just think she was being funny. I don't think she actually thought she was shooting Diet Coke out of her breast. It could have happened. So my grandmother has this whole thing, and she goes to the hospital, and what they tell my family, my sad, huddled family, is that her throat has a hole, that she had been taking her medications, and that they were lodging in her throat, and they had formed an ulceration. They had created a hole, and all of her food and half of her meds were going through her throat and becoming septic, and that they couldn't do anything for her. So that was right before Christmas, and 10 days from the time that she was laughing in her kitchen to the time that just 10 days later she was gone, which was really hard to handle. And I was very far away. And so I'm on the phone with my cousin, and she's trying to explain to me what's going on, and, you know, come for the funeral and yada yada. And somehow along the way, I hear word that there's going to be urns, and that all the women in the family are going to have an urn, and they're going to divide my grandmother's ashes, which is totally weird and hard to contemplate. So you become very disembodied at that point where you're thinking, I just talked to her about Diet Coke, and now she's ashes, and we're talking about dividing it up. And do I want that? Like, what do you do with someone's ashes? Like, she never liked them. That's where she's going to end up. A piece of her will be here, and I don't even know if that's okay with her, but whatever. So then we come to the funeral part of it, and it's totally horrible and tragic, and I see my grandmother, and she doesn't look anything like I remember her, and they've got the lipstick color wrong, and I'm furious about that. I'm like, it's melon, it's not horror raspberry, what the hell? So, you know, basically what happened was there were only so much money to go around, and so all the sisters got urns, but I didn't get one. And it seemed like a stupid point. At that point I thought, well, but I want some of Grandma's ashes. Don't I rank at all? Like I want her ashes, which is so weird and dumb. So we get to the home, her house, afterward, which was also very heartwarming and gut-wrenching, because the thing that really got me was her Keds were parked like kind of off-kilter by the front door, and you could still see like the impression of her foot and like how she must have just kicked them off, and then that was it. And my grandfather said, you know, you guys should just go into her room and find, you know, just take something that means something to you. And at that time, my son was only 6 months old, so he's sitting with me on the bed. And my grandparents slept in separate beds, which was weird to me. Both sets of my grandparents slept in separate beds. And so I'm sitting on my grandmother's bed, and there's like the end table, and I open the drawer, and there's all these St. Christopher medals, and there's her rosary, and there's all her accoutrements, and little pictures of I found a tiny picture of my cousin Jake, who happened to be sitting with me on the bed at that point. And I said, I want melon-colored lipstick, I want one of her weird curlers, and I want her Vegas bra, which is this beige cross-your-heart bra that she had sewn pockets into, because I said, how did you want to make money at Vegas? And she said, I fill up one side, and when that side, the right side's empty, I put all of it into the left, and when this one's empty and this one's full, I'm done, ha-ha! So, and she always came out ahead, so I thought, well, this woman is very wise, and I want that bra. Which my family thought was insane. They just thought, my grandma's bra, you weirdo. But I remember it's a very rhythmic lady, and that sucker fits. It's pointy, that's weird, so I won't wear it, but in any case. So then, now it's time to have this awkward conversation. Oh, and another thing, my grandmother, every year, she would go garaging, and so she would collect boxes in her closet with everybody's name on it, and she would put into it the owls or the gaudy jewelry or whatever, Barbies, whatever you were still into. And in the closet, there was a box that had my name on it, and the only thing that was in it was an angel Christmas tree topper, which I take out every year, and that seemed very sweet to have received that as her last gift to me. But there was still the matter of the ashes. And I realized I had gotten kind of stiffed in this process, and so I had to bring it up to my grandfather, and I said, you know, I didn't get any of Grandma's ashes. And so my grandfather goes, okay, come on, come with me. And I go, okay, and I go into their marital bedroom from this big gaudy vanity with this big horribly awkward mirror, and I sit on the bed, and I'm just like, I don't know how to behave. How do you handle this when you're, I mean, he was with this woman for 36 years or something. That was a very long marriage. 50, I'm sorry, it was more than that. It was a very, long time they were together. And so he gets this box out of the closet, and he very matter-of-factly plops it down onto the vanity, and he pulls open the flaps. It's just an ordinary cardboard box. And he pulls out this really long, like the top part of the bag is super long, so he has to crumple it down, and then he opens it, and he gets out a Secrets tin, and he takes out a spoon, and he starts plopping things into this tin. And I'm looking at him. He's very matter-of-fact, he's whistling. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's my grandmother. And I didn't know about human remains is that it's not like this pretty ashes, it's bone and pieces. And he's throwing it into this tin, and he closes the lid, which my grandmother gave me everything in a Secrets tin. If you ever wanted something from my grandmother, she put it in a Secrets tin or a Tic Tac box, and she put a rubber band around it and give it to you. So this wasn't really that weird, I guess. but I didn't know what to do with it. And it seemed like I had expected it to be this reverent moment, and instead it's just, here's your cough drops / grandmother with a rubber band around it. And I go, thank you very much, I'll take this home and do whatever now I'm supposed to do with it. I don't know what to do with it. So for the longest time I had no idea. And I knew I wanted to find a pretty box, but I also knew that somehow there would be bones, and then I would have, it couldn't be, or like an urn, it couldn't be anything with too big of a neck because the bones wouldn't fit, and I couldn't conceive of trying to jam my grandmother into a thing. So I put it out of my mind, and there was a rubber band around it, which differentiated that Secrets tin from the many others that my grandmother had given me over time that had really horrible jewelry inside of them. And so I put everything away in this jewelry box that she had given me, and we flash forward like 10 years. And my sister is visiting, she's there with her son and my daughter, and they're all on my bed. And I have told them earlier in the night, oh my God, I have some of Grandma's horrible jewelry. We should go get that, like clip-on earrings and this really hideously ugly stuff. And so they're all on the bed. And I go to the jewelry box and I open the drawer and I pull out the Secrets tin and I open it up and I'm talking to them and I go, I think I found it. And then I went, oh! And I inhaled my grandmother. I mean, seriously, like literally inhaled my grandmother. And then I had to explain to all of them what had happened through my sooty, tear-stained face. And they all laughed and cried and fell off the bed for like 20 minutes. And I closed up the tin and I put it away. And now my grandmother will be with me forever.